Okay, Canon 5D Mark II in 2024. So yes, I went and bought myself one, used for less than 250 quid. I'll give you an exact price in a minute when I add up everything, including the lens adapter and everything else. So, why did I go and buy a 5D Mark II now? I wanted a nice, cheap, quality camera that I could go out and use for fun, where if it did break, it's not the end of the world because it's cheap and I can buy a replacement quite cheaply. In fact, it's about the price of a half decent lens, to be quite well, more than a half decent lens. So, pardon if you can hear any cricketing noises in the background. My dad has the TV on very, very loudly and he's watching the test match. So, 5D Mark II. I bought this camera. Oh, and the seagulls you can hear outside, they're going nuts as well. 5D Mark II. Now, this came out in 2008 and was Canon's replacement for the their 5D, their original 5D, sort of, that introduced us to their digital full frame, sort of all-round camera range. Now, of course, they've sprouted out since then. They got the 1DX line, but they had the 1DS line and the 1D line as well. The 1DS Mark IV is, I'm not sure if it's older or younger, but it's got slightly better resolution, and it's basically, you look at a 1DX and it's like it's the precursor to that. But I'm getting off topic here. So 5D Mark II. So yes, I bought it for 220 quid off eBay. It came with 2 batteries, charger, and a couple of memory cards. I didn't use the memory cards. I bought a new one because they're really, really cheap, and I just don't like using old cards that I didn't buy. Now, I used a M42 mount Carl Zeiss Jenner DDR 50mm f2.8 lens, and the K&F Concept M42 to EOS EF mount lens adapter. Whole lot cost about 100 quid, £300 in total. That included 220 for the camera. I think I bought the lens. Actually, yeah, it may be slightly less. No. When I add up the memory cards, well, yep, 300 quid. That's it. Here you go, 300 quid. Now, there's no coincidence that I bring this video out shortly after the announcement of the Canon's R1 and R5 Mark II, and this is I'll explain why. Basically, I'm getting a bit disillusioned with these new cameras that keep coming out, and the reason I keep getting disillusioned is because it's like every 2 or 3 years. Now, when the 5D Mark III came out, you waited a good few years before that came out, after the 5D Mark II, and there's a good reason for that. You didn't need to replace it so quickly. But with the mirrorless ones, it seems to be every other year now. I mean, I have an X8, I have a Fujifilm X-H2 now. I got rid of the Panasonic GH6 basically because I was really struggling with the camera itself. It was really, really hard to use. It wasn't user friendly, and it was making me not want to use it basically. Whereas this 5D Mark II, I wanted to use it. It's nice and easy to use. You set it up, off you go. Now, I set my ISO at 800. I should say all these photos were taken on the same day with this 5D Mark II and the lens setup and everything else that I mentioned earlier. I shot everything at ISO 800, and I used a Carl Zeiss Jenner 50mm f2.8 lens, M42 mount. I think I mentioned that already. Sorry, I got the sniffles. And one thing I did find was that it was overexposing by a stop. So basically, I used exposure compensation and made it basically underexposed by a stop, and that seemed to cure the overexposure problem quite nice and easy. I think I had a couple of photos where the highlights were still overexposed a bit, but that's not a massive problem. But it is an issue to think about with the 5D Mark II. Dynamic range is not super brilliant. I mean, it's okay. You just have to be very skilled at deciding if do you want to white out your sky. I mean, if it's cloudy and that wasn't me, by the way. If you heard that, that was my dad in the living room. Very loud sneeze. Sorry about that. What was I talking about? Oh yes. So yeah, the highlights a bit off. So I wouldn't use it for landscape photography, but I would use it for general photography, maybe a bit of macro. The lens I used actually has a 35, I think it's 35 centimeter minimum focal distance, so I could get within just over a foot of something to take a picture. So I got some very nice. You can fill the frame basically. Like I said, it's nice and easy to set up. The exposure compensation, I had to go into the menu system to do it because it wouldn't do it using the dedicated button on top. For some reason, it just wouldn't set it. Not entirely sure why. It was very annoying, but I went and did it manually inside the menu system. And that's the other thing. The menu system on this is nice and simple. You go on a modern mirrorless camera now, and there's menu after 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 menu, which is so annoying. And here's one of the reasons why I like Fujifilm cameras, because you just set it up once and you can use all the controls on the top, like a vintage camera. So why a 5D Mark II? Why not a Nikon D600, D610 or something? And reason for that is you can adapt a lot more vintage lenses to the EF mount than you can to the F mount. Now, with the Nikon F mount, you can get their old manual focus F mount lenses, but they have to be AI lenses. If you get the pre-AI ones, the older lenses, they have an extra bit sticking out, and you will damage your camera with those. So stay away from those if you're a Nikon user. But yeah, the AI lenses, the manual AI lenses, and old F mount and AFD lenses, which are ridiculously cheap. You can use all of those on it, no problem. So going back to Canon now. Canon, you can use all sorts of lenses because you can get all sorts of adapters for them, including Nikon lenses, by the way. And that's to do with the flange distance, basically the distance between the rear element of the lens and the sensor. It's in such a good position that you can put all these different lens adapters on to use all these different lenses, including the M42, and still get infinity focus. Now, with the images you're seeing, I took them all on the same day with the setup I mentioned earlier. I was surprised how many were in focus or super close to being super in focus. Some of them were slightly out, but it's not noticeable unless you pixel peek, which is fine. And another big benefit of buying this old camera is, 21.1 megapixels. That is more than enough if all you're going to do is post it on social media, so like Instagram, Facebook, X, or WhatsApp, or whatever else. You can print from them. You can use the upscaling feature in Lightroom to make it 4 times the size of what it is now. So it'd be an 85-ish megapixel image if you don't crop, of course, and with no loss of detail. In fact, there might even be more detail. I've only done it a couple of times before. So the time of having to have a super high megapixel camera is over. You don't need it. Only reason, if you buy this, you could buy the EOS 1DC if you wanted to shoot video and you didn't want to have to use adapters. EF to whatever adapters, or change your entire setup. Now, obviously, the file in that isn't the best in the world, and it's not the best dynamic range in the world. But that camera is like, you shoot 4K in that. If you're looking at 8K, then why are you even bothering to watch this video? You want 8K, buy an XH2, Fujifilm XH2, a Canon R5 Mark II, or a Nikon Z8, Z9, or a Sony. You don't want this camera if you're shooting that kind of video, unless you obviously want a separate camera for photography, which you can. And by the way, 4K, I think I've said this before, 4K is only just over 8 megapixels. So if you're thinking about putting it on a big display, a big 4K display, you shouldn't worry about it. I mean, I used a Fujifilm X-T4 to shoot a lot of my stuff for my master's degree, and we had one of those massive screens to show everything on to everybody in the class, and I was shocked by the detail on that. So yeah, okay. So my shooting experience, this camera is not bad. Battery life is great, always is on a DSLR, far superior to mirrorless. There's a swathe of used lenses and accessories you can get for this camera that you can use on the next one, like the 5D Mark III. Now I wouldn't mind getting one of those purely because I just like the 5D Mark III. It's exactly the same body as the 5DS and the 5DSR, which I've had both cameras before. It's a little bit more expensive, so you're looking at nearer £400 for a decent copy of that. Maybe a bit more. And obviously it's got a slight bump in resolution, not much though. But no, 5D Mark II. It's the first full frame camera I ever used before when I talking more than a decade ago now. And it's weird. It doesn't have the on-off switch by the shutter button. It's on the back, and it took a little while for me to get used to that. To remember, I was trying to flick it round with my little finger, with my finger, going, "Where's it gone? Oh, it's on the back." Oh, idiot. But yeah, that's another thing actually. 5D Mark II. Some films were actually shot in a 5D Mark II. Some very well regarded films, in fact. I mean, you'd have to look them up. I can't remember them offhand. So yeah, if you just want to practice filmmaking, you can use the HD shooting in this. I mean, it shoots HD, which, to be fair, when you're looking at stuff on YouTube, HD and 4K, there's not much difference, and that's down to the compression. So again, if you're shooting for YouTube, I honestly don't know why you want to shoot in 4K or even 8K. All that file size, all that storage you need. Nah, don't need to. I mean, you can shoot HD on this, no problem. And of course, it has the ability to monitor your audio and audio input, and you can adjust your audio. And of course, you slap a lens on there. You can put, variable ND filters and all that sort of stuff. So you can do cheap filmmaking with it quite easily. If you just want to learn how to do it before say you move on to shooting stuff in more higher resolution like 4K and 8K eventually. But I think this is a great student camera as well. So if you're doing a project and you want to use photography as part of your project, it might not necessarily you might not necessarily be doing a photography degree. You might be doing some kind of art degree or media studies or anything like that. Anything where you or journalism. That's another thing. Photojournalism. This was very much used in photojournalism at the time as well, along with the 1DX series after it. 1DX was more aimed at sport though. But, so yes, these 5D Mark IIs, they are, photographers were taking them all over the world into all sorts of conditions, and they're built quite well. They're well built. The copy I've got, there's very little outward marks on it, or evidence of heavy use, that's the other thing, their longevity, which I do worry about with mirrorless cameras, because mirrorless cameras haven't been around anywhere near as long. So that worries me, that the heavier electronics, the heavier amount of electronics that are in a mirrorless camera over a DSLR, if something goes wrong in one of them and you're off in the middle of nowhere, it's like, oh, what am I going to do now? Well, yeah, you can take these to the desert, you can take them to the ocean, under the ocean, up into the sky. It doesn't really matter. They just work. They're workhorse cameras. If you want a workhorse camera, go for a DSLR. Don't go for the only mirrorless cameras I would recommend would be the ones with the built-in battery grips. So the R1, the R3, the Z9. Is there any more than that? Don't think Sony... See, that's the other thing. Sony haven't built one yet with a built-in battery grip, which I find very strange. Anyway. Yes. Image quality is excellent, as you can see from the photos in the video. I didn't have to do much tweaking to them. Obviously my style is to add a bit of vignette, as you will notice a lot more in some than in others. I like to tone down a lot of the colour, but then I like to push up the vibrance of it as well. So I reduce saturation but push up the vibrance so it looks a bit more brighter. Obviously black and white, I love to add more sort of a gritty look to my black and white photos, purely because I like that look. Not because I'm trying to mimic film or anything. I just like that look in black and white. I don't like the sanitized look you get in a lot of photos I've noticed on Facebook and Instagram and other photo sharing sites, even here on YouTube, where they're like, there's no noise, they're super sharp. They look a bit manufactured, to be quite. They look like they could have been generated by AI now as well. That's the other thing you've got to worry about, is AI generated images. Now, that's a whole topic in itself. But yeah, I think I'm going to end it here because I'm rambling. But if you want a nice cheap full frame camera that you can go out and use and not worry about if it breaks, because you can just go and buy another one for another couple £100, less than the cost of a decent lens I might add for one of these as well. You might be able to get a 24 to 105 f4 lens for about the same price. Then this camera's for you. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed the pictures. Not so much my rant. I mean, you can always turn the sound off and just watch the lovely pictures. Okay, until the next time, bye bye.